On the New York Stock Exchange, an average trading day can result in more than several billion shares changing hands. But when we say changing hands, how does that actually occur? In this morning's U.S. Bank Economic 360, U.S. Bank Vice President and Senior Portfolio Manager Mike Denneman joins Business Courier editor Rob Dahlmeyer in the studio to talk about what goes on behind the scenes with security settlement. Mike and Rob.
Peg, thank you. And this is not boring, as Mike was trying to tell me beforehand, but what is security settlement?
Sure. So like Peg said, it's the changing hands of those transactions. So after you make a stock trade, you owe somebody that stock. They in turn owe you the money that they're paying for it. So after that trade happens, it's the behind the scenes process to make sure that all of that gets ironed out. It's just like any other transaction. Somebody has to pay, somebody else gets what they paid for. But with financial securities, it's a little bit more complex. Like Peg just said, on any given day, there could be billions and billions of shares moving back and forth. So there needs to be a process behind the scenes to make sure all of that gets taken care of smoothly.
So which is why I think it's interesting. You said billions and billions, and it's something that most of us in our lifetime have done many, many times. But is this handled electronically, obviously?
Like most things these days, yeah, most of it happens electronically. Of course, that wasn't always the case. As recent as maybe early mid-'70s, it was still taken care of with paper.
Wow.
Stock certificates, bond certificates, and you can imagine as volume on the exchanges increased, the paper piled up, and it got to the point where it was unmanageable. So moving to a more automated system is how we got what's called the Depository Trust Company, or DTC. And so DTC today has electronically on record a lot of those former stock and bond certificates, and when a trade occurs at the end of the day, they are the clearinghouse to make sure that everything gets to where it needs to go. But there's still a catch. Despite it being more efficient, despite it being electronic, it still takes 3 days to happen.
3 days? But is that because of the clearing at the end, or what? Why?
That seems so counterintuitive in this
totally.
day and age that electronic transactions would take days to complete. It's actually a system that's called T+3. T being trade date, and then 3 additional business days. That's how long you have to get your shares to the person that bought them, and they get the money to you. But despite being electronic, it's not as easy as just me zapping shares from my account into yours. So there are intermediaries, there are custodians, banks, and brokerage firms, and they exchange shares, and then those entities have to make sure they get into the proper account. So it's a lot more complex than just, you know, electrons moving, you know, through a wire.
Right.
But it's also a process that you don't want to mess up. So it's important to take the time to make sure it gets sorted out. All of that said, there's good news on the horizon. 20 years ago is when we moved from the previous standard, which was T+5, to the T+3 that we still have today. But there's plans underway that maybe as soon as next year even, we shorten that by a day to T+2. So still not instantaneous, but we're getting closer. So
that's very interesting. I mean, everything seems to be instantaneous, but so when you talk about something like this, it's very easy to forget, almost like, you know, politics or how to make hamburger, that something has to be done behind the scenes.
Sure.
And it's really pretty important to at least have a base understanding, which I now have.
Exactly. Imagine, you know, you make that stock trade, you push the button on the computer, and you think, done?
It ain't done.
No, there's a lot of wheels going on behind the scenes.
It is fascinating. Thank you so much. Back